Please wake up, I whispered, gazing at my husband's serene face as he lay in his casket. His peaceful expression almost fooled me into thinking he was merely asleep, ready to stir at any moment. Well, off I go, his cheerful voice echoed in my mind, bidding farewell to me and our daughter before embarking on his business trip just 2 days prior. Little did I know it would be the last time I hear his voice. His sudden departure from this world by his own hand left me in disbelief. No matter how desperately I called out to him, he remained silent, his once warm presence now as cold as ice. As I struggled to come to terms with the grim reality, something caught my eye. A solitary photograph resting on his chest. It was a family picture, but one I didn't recall placing there. Who could have placed it, and why? Intrigued and unnerved, I picked up the photo, turning it over to find a chilling message scrawled on the back. "Run away now." A shiver ran down my spine as I turned to find my mother-in-law's cold gaze fixed upon me. In that moment, I realized I had unwittingly stumbled into a nightmare from which there was no easy escape. I'm Bella, 32 years old, and my journey through life has been marked by both tragedy and love. Losing both my parents in a car accident while I was still in college left me feeling utterly alone in the world. The weight of grief seemed insurmountable. Fortunately, John, my boyfriend at the time, became my pillar of support. After graduating, we tied the knot, finding solace and happiness in each other's company. Our little family expanded with the arrival of our daughter, Hannah, who brought immeasurable joy into our lives. Our family circle extended to include my mother-in-law and brother-in-law, forming a tight-knit support system. Sadly, the passing of my father-in-law a year ago left a void in our hearts. His sudden demise, attributed to what was initially termed an illness but revealed to be a fatal heart attack, shook us all profoundly. Despite the loss, financial worries never haunted us, thanks to the prosperous business my in-laws managed. Originally, my father-in-law had envisioned his capable and compassionate younger brother taking the reins as CEO. However, fate intervened, claiming him before his plans could materialize. Consequently, the responsibility fell upon my brother-in-law, the eldest son, to lead the family's business legacy forward. Dad wanted me to take over, but I couldn't possibly do that over my older brother. I'll support him. My husband's reverence for his brother ran deep, leading him to gracefully step aside from the CEO position. His respect for family hierarchy was unwavering. My brother-in-law, in turn, displayed a genuine kindness towards me, often engaging in friendly conversations. While our bond blossomed, my interactions with my mother-in-law were marked by a noticeable strain. Initially, my mother-in-law extended warmth towards me, even bonding over cooking sessions, expressing how much she cherished our time together. Her affectionate gestures painted a picture of familial harmony. However, with my father-in-law's passing, a frosty silence enveloped her demeanor. Both my husband and I felt the chill of her withdrawal, her once warm gaze now evading ours. Even our daughter, Hannah, accustomed to adoration as the first grandchild, faced her grandmother's icy reception, met with disapproving glances and curt responses. "She used to be such a sweet person before," my husband lamented, his disappointment palpable. Witnessing his distress, my heart ached with sympathy. "Something seems off about Mom," my husband voiced his concerns, furrowing his brows in deep contemplation. "She's glaring at me as if I'm her enemy. Could she think we're after her assets? Or maybe she's unwell?" Despite his introspection, he couldn't pinpoint a plausible explanation for her sudden change in demeanor. The shift first became apparent during my father-in-law's one-week memorial service. Exhausted from the solemn proceedings, we sought respite at her home. However, our tranquility was shattered when we awoke to find our bag of clothes missing from the room. Could it be a burglary? I pondered aloud, but the selective disappearance of our belongings cast doubt on that theory. As we scoured the house, a plume of smoke billowed from the backyard, drawing our attention. To our disbelief, we discovered our possessions ablaze, and there stood my mother-in-law. "Mom, did you do this?" we implored, seeking an explanation for her inexplicable actions. But she remained silent, her wide-eyed gaze and trembling hands betraying her fear. "Why, Mom? What have we done to deserve this hostility?" We pleaded for answers, but her lips remained sealed, leaving us grappling with uncertainty and confusion. Despite her stoic silence, John extended a hand of understanding to his mother, his voice laced with gentle reassurance. "You're not worried about us going after your assets, are you? I'm not interested in your possessions. Please believe me, mother-in-law. We only want what's best for you." However, our pleas fell on deaf ears as mother-in-law icily commanded, "Leave, both of you, and don't return." With heavy hearts, we departed, our once close bond with her fractured, reduced to mere remnants of what it once was. For the past year, we maintained a distant relationship. Our attempts at reconciliation met with resistance from mother-in-law's unwavering animosity. Then, out of the blue, a message from my brother-in-law beckoned us to the first anniversary memorial service for my father-in-law. Despite mother-in-law's continued coldness, we decided to attend, hoping for a glimpse of reconciliation. Yet her aloofness persisted, serving as a painful reminder of the chasm that now separated us. Witnessing John's contemplative expression amid the familial discord, I couldn't help but wonder about the thoughts brewing in his mind. "What's on your mind, John? Are you concerned about your mother?" I inquired softly, sensing the weight of his thoughts. With a gentle touch, John reassured me, "Don't worry, Bella. If there's anything troubling you, just let me know." His tender gesture, brushing away my worries, brought a sense of calm to my troubled heart. His comforting presence was a balm to my anxieties. A month passed, filled with the familiar routines of family life. As John prepared for another business trip, his cheerful demeanor lifted our spirits. However, his sudden return caught me off guard. With a small charm in hand, he bestowed upon me a gesture of protection. His smile, warm and reassuring, filled me with gratitude for the love we shared. Yet the tranquility was shattered by a harrowing turn of events. The next day brought the shocking news of John's untimely death. His lifeless body was discovered in his car on a remote mountain road near my parents' home in Colorado. The circumstances surrounding his demise puzzled and devastated me. Contrary to his claims of a business trip, there were no scheduled engagements. Instead, his final moments were marked by a heart-wrenching call to my brother-in-law, confessing unbearable pain and a desire to end his suffering. The revelation left me reeling with guilt and confusion. I blamed myself for failing to recognize his anguish, grappling with unanswered questions and an overwhelming sense of loss. Beside his lifeless form, I felt my strength waning, but my brother-in-law's steadfast support steadied me in the face of despair. "Stay," he urged, his presence a beacon of solace in the darkness of grief. "Bella, stay strong." My brother-in-law's voice wavered with emotion, mirroring the turmoil in my own heart. I wish I had understood John's pain better. Why did this happen? The weight of sorrow bore down on me, compounded by Hannah's tears as she clung to me for solace. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law's stoic glare offered no comfort, her expression devoid of tears. Amidst our collective grief, my brother-in-law and John's colleagues took charge of the funeral arrangements, their somber efficiency a stark contrast to the overwhelming emotions engulfing me. "Please wake up," I whispered to John on the day of his funeral, his serene visage in the casket belying the finality of his passing. It felt as though he could stir from slumber at any moment, if only I called out to him. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I held on him tightly, seeking refuge in his familiar presence. In the midst of my sorrow, a glimmer of curiosity stirred within me as I noticed a lone photograph resting on John's chest. Who had placed it there, and what significance did it hold in this moment of profound loss? Intrigued, I lifted the photograph, only to find John's face marred by ruthless slashes from a cutter. My heart quickened as I read the ominous message scrawled on the back. "Run away now." Questions swirled in my mind. Who was the intended recipient of this chilling warning? As a shiver ran down my spine, I turned to find my mother-in-law's icy stare fixed upon me, her gaze piercing through me with unnerving intensity. Could she be involved? The tension thickened as she hastily looked away upon meeting my gaze, sparking a surge of suspicion within me. Discreetly, I slipped the photograph into the pocket of my dress, determined to unravel the mystery. In the aftermath of the funeral, amidst the quietude that followed, my thoughts kept returning to the cryptic message on the photograph. Though the sender remained elusive, the initials hinted at a possible connection. The only cess I could think of was Scarlett, my mother-in-law. Doubts gnawed at me, challenging the narrative of John's untimely demise. Desperate for answers, I resolved to confront my mother-in-law, bracing myself for the confrontation ahead. As I stepped into her home, my mother-in-law's demeanor remained as frosty as ever. With my brother-in-law absent at work, it was just the two of us in the sullen silence. "What brings you here all of a sudden?" she inquired, her tone guarded. "I was hoping to uncover some insights into John's passing." Perhaps there's a clue here in his childhood home, I replied, my words tinged with uncertainty. Lacking the courage to confront her directly, I found myself fabricating a reason for my visit. Searching for a distraction, my gaze wandered to the towering bookshelf dominating the living room. A testament to the family's love for literature, it housed not only novels but also encyclopedias and dictionaries. Among them, I spotted a few volumes from John's student days, evoking a wave of nostalgia. Curiosity getting the better of me, I reached for a couple of books, each adorned with a stamped initial indicating ownership. Beside John's J was a small, endearing image of a cuddling cat. The sight warmed my heart, a reminder of his gentle nature that always brought a smile to my face. As I perused the books, I couldn't shake off the palpable weight of my mother-in-law's gaze boring into my back. Amidst the sea of familiar titles, one book stood out, still clad in its cover. As I gingerly opened it, I discovered a tome on poisonous plants, its pages adorned with numerous post-it notes. My heart skipped a beat as I stumbled upon a note detailing the very poison that claimed my husband's life. The book bore a stamp of ownership, a damning piece of evidence that left me reeling. Summoning all my courage, I turned to my mother-in-law, brandishing the book before her. Her stoic facade crumbled as tears streamed down her face. I'm the one responsible. Please forgive me, she choked out amidst sobs. The revelation sent shockwaves through me, but there was no time for hesitation. We need to inform the authorities, I insisted, my voice trembling with urgency. With a heavy heart, I relayed the truth to the police. As I grappled with the gravity of the situation, my brother-in-law arrived home, oblivious to the turmoil that had unfolded. Concern etched upon his features, he questioned the somber atmosphere, his eyes darting between me and my tearful mother-in-law. What's happened? Why is Bella here? Please tell me, he implored, his voice laced with apprehension. I wanted to talk to my mother-in-law about my husband, I stammered, my words faltering as I struggled to find the right way to broach the subject. Understanding washed over my brother-in-law's face as he listened. Losing him must have been incredibly difficult for you. Are you feeling any better now, Bella? He inquired gently, his concern palpable. Unable to meet his gaze, I hesitated, grappling with the weight of unspoken truths. Before I could utter a word, my brother-in-law's unexpected confession caught me off guard. I know this isn't the time, but I've always harbored feelings for you, Bella. And Hannah, she's just so precious to me. Would you ever consider giving us a chance, starting in you? His words hung in the air, surprising me with their sincerity. I never imagined my brother-in-law harboring such feelings. Thank you, but I can't even fathom such thoughts right now, I replied, my voice tinged with gratitude and regret. Understanding flickered in his eyes as he accepted my response. Awkwardly scratching his head, he took the photograph from my outstretched hand. I'm sorry, he murmured, his gaze falling upon the image of my husband's battered face and the ominous message scrawled on its reverse. As the reality of the photograph's contents sank in, my brother-in-law's complexion paled, a gasp escaping his lips. This was inside John's coffin. Who could have done such a thing? His shock mirrored my own as we grappled with the sinister implications of the discovery. It's possible that someone at the funeral knows what happened to John, I mused aloud, the pieces of the puzzle slowly coming together in my mind. Wait a moment. John took his own life, so there's no perpetrator to speak of, I reasoned, trying to quell the rising unease. However, my brother-in-law appeared perplexed, his agitation palpable as he shifted uneasily. But in my dreams, John's voice echoes, accusing someone of betrayal and expressing hatred. I divulged, watching as his eyes widened in shock, his features contorting with alarm as if confronted with a horrifying revelation. And I found this, I continued, retrieving the damning evidence from the living room bookshelf. As I handed him the book on poisonous plants with incriminating notes, his expression morphed into one of profound concern, realizing the gravity of the situation. I presented the book on poisonous plants that I had discovered earlier, pointing out the bookplate bearing my brother-in-law's name, indicated by the stamped letter K. What are you insinuating? Are you suggesting that I murdered my own brother? My brother-in-law demanded. His voice tinged with disbelief. Instead of answering, I pressed on with my revelation. Beside me, my mother-in-law remained silent, her gaze fixed on the unfolding drama. And there's more, I declared, retrieving the charm my husband had given me. Carefully, I extracted a letter concealed within. Its contents sent shockwaves through the room. My brother killed our father with a poisonous plant. Amidst the somber atmosphere of my husband's funeral, I clung to the charm he had gifted me, finding solace in its tangible reminder of his love. Yes, I held it. A faint suspicion nudged at my consciousness. Could there be something hidden within? From the outer covering, that's hardly substantial evidence, my brother-in-law scoffed dismissively as I retrieved a small object concealed within the charm. Undeterred, I produced my phone and played a video that revealed a damning conversation between my husband and my brother-in-law. In the footage, my brother-in-law confessed to intentionally ending his father's life. He assured my husband that he harbored no ill intent toward our family and vowed to turn himself in to the authorities. It was a shocking revelation that left me reeling with a mixture of regret and fury. My husband, in an act of foresight, had clandestinely recorded the conversation by setting up a camera in their parents' house, a fact detailed in the accompanying letter. As I absorbed the gravity of the situation, my heart burned with a potent blend of emotions. You admitted your crime to my husband, then urged him to turn you in, only to take his life with the same poisonous plant, didn't you? I confronted my brother-in-law, the weight of betrayal heavy in my voice. John trusted you until the very end. Why would you commit such a heinous act? As I pressed him for answers, my brother-in-law's demeanor shifted, his once gentle countenance contorting into a terrifying visage as he clicked his tongue in frustration, his eyes flashing with anger. In that tense moment, my mother-in-law's anguish erupted into tears, her sobs filling the room. Why? How could you do something so cruel? She cried out, her confession echoing the painful truth of her complicity. It dawned on me then, the origins of this tragedy rooted in the bond between the brothers. Despite their closeness in childhood, envy and resentment had poisoned my brother-in-law's heart over time, leading to a series of petty pranks aimed at undermining his talented younger sibling John. My in-laws had always maintained strict discipline with my brother-in-law, aware of his penchant for mischief. Despite this, John never harbored any resentment towards his brother, instead choosing to admire and support him. This unwavering loyalty only deepened my mother-in-law's sense of dismay. Following my father-in-law's sudden demise while tidying the bookshelf, my mother-in-law stumbled upon a book detailing poisonous plants. Despite the diagnosis of a heart attack, John had never displayed any prior heart issues during his medical checkups, leaving me with a lingering sense of unease. It was then that I noticed a bookmark nestled within the book, detailing the exact symptoms my husband had experienced before his passing. A revelation that sent shockwaves through me. Even more alarming was my brother-in-law's intense fascination with the book on poisonous plants, a detail that did not escape my notice. To add to the growing list of unsettling discoveries, my mother-in-law unearthed a photograph of John's disfigured face hidden within the pages of the book, further deepening the mystery surrounding his untimely demise. Despite her suspicions, my mother-in-law hesitated to confront my brother-in-law without concrete evidence, knowing he would likely deny any wrongdoing. At my father-in-law's memorial service, during our visit to the family home, my mother-in-law was visibly shaken to discover my brother-in-law burning our belongings. Fearing for her safety, she chose to distance herself from us, her demeanor growing cold and distant. In a moment of desperation, she confided in me, her voice strained with anguish as she explained her actions. Her face etched with worry lines, I struggled to find the right words to comfort her. Even after we stopped visiting, she recounted, my brother-in-law's behavior grew increasingly ominous. He muttered to himself, I have to do something about John, leaving me deeply concerned. I recounted how I had tried to warn my husband at his first memorial, using the photo phone in the book about poisonous plants as a covert means of communication. I had also whispered to John about the possibility that his brother Ken may have been responsible for their father's death. Unfortunately, it seemed our attempt to warn my husband had backfired. If he hadn't been aware, he might not have confronted my brother-in-law. And perhaps things wouldn't have escalated to this extent. My mother and I were overwhelmed with regret, each of us blaming ourselves for the unfolding tragedy. I struggled to find the right words to respond to her anguish. It's all because our father refused to let me take over the company, my brother-in-law interjected bitterly, deflecting blame onto our deceased father. But John always stood up for you, insisting that he couldn't become president by sidelining you. I couldn't contain my frustration. As if that matters. Both our father and John loved you. There was no need for you to resort to such drastic measures. What's the point now? I exclaimed, my voice tinged with a mixture of anger and despair. Defiantly, my brother-in-law dismissed our accusations with a chilling expression. Blame the parents who favored my younger brother and the facade of the good son John. It's all your fault, he retorted, his words sending shivers down my spine. You've taken away my beloved husband. I'll never forgive you. I seethed, my anger boiling over at my brother-in-law's callous actions. Shut up. If you hadn't interfered, you could have been my wife, he spat back venomously, his words dripping with malice. Suddenly, he lunged at me with a knife he had concealed, the glint of metal sending a chill down my spine. Panicked, I screamed for help and attempted to flee, but he was relentless, swiftly closing the distance between us. With nowhere left to run, I found myself cornered, facing the sharp edge of the blade. Instinctively, I shut my eyes, racing for the worst. Then, a resounding thud echoed through the room as someone intervened to shield me from harm. To my astonishment, it was my mother-in-law. Mother-in-law, are you hurt? I gasped, seeing her grimace as blood trickled from her injured arm. Ken, please stop this madness. Turn yourself in, she pleaded, her voice trembling with urgency. Shut up, both of you. You're the ones who need to disappear, my brother-in-law snarled, his rage unabated. Why would you go to such lengths, especially now that you've achieved your dream of becoming CEO? I implored, struggling to understand his motives amidst the chaos. I need money, my brother-in-law confessed, his desperation palpable. Despite assuming control of the company, he lacked the business acumen to manage it, burdening himself with mounting debts within a year. In a desperate bid to alleviate his financial woes, he resorted to taking out a hefty life insurance policy on my husband, his younger brother. It's amusing, really. John believed my lies so easily, even when I pretended to confess, my brother-in-law chuckled bitterly, his laughter tinged with malice. I recoiled in disgust at his callous demeanor, but even in his deceit, he remained cautious, ensuring that John didn't consume the drink he had offered. A toast to our farewell, he sneered, his suspicions of poisonous herbs evident. Yet he did shake John's hand, unwittingly transferring traces of the lethal substance. John had a habit of licking his fingers, you know? So it's no surprise the poison began to take effect during the car ride home, my brother-in-law boasted, his voice filled with a twisted sense of triumph as he brandished a knife before us. Despite everything, my husband still wanted to save you. Why couldn't you understand his compassion? I exclaimed, frustration seeping into my voice. Blame my parents for favoring John over me, my brother-in-law retorted defiantly, deflecting responsibility onto others. As tension reached its peak, the arrival of the police brought an end to the harrowing ordeal. Despite their intervention, my brother-in-law continued to struggle until the very end. My brother-in-law's desperate pleas fell on deaf ears as he gasped and finally succumbed to the authorities, his tumultuous outbursts quelled. Thankfully, my mother-in-law's injury proved to be minor, and she was quickly on the path to recovery. As my brother-in-law was escorted away by the police, it became clear that he harbored no remorse for his actions, leaving little doubt that he would face a lengthy sentence behind bars. With him out of our lives, I found solace in the comfort of my mother-in-law's embrace. Returning to her former self, my mother-in-law showered affection upon my daughter Hannah and me. Together, we forged a sense of familial harmony, finding happiness in each other's company. And as I revisited the letter concealed within the charm my husband had given me, its heartfelt message served as a poignant reminder of his enduring love. Bella, you are my treasure. I love you always. Embracing my husband's enduring affection, I resolved to carry on, finding strength in his unwavering love and the bond shared between us. Once, something happened that I never expected. I took my husband to the doctor for his usual checkup. But instead of everything being fine, the doctor said something really serious. Dr. Lawrence looked very serious and told me something shocking about my husband. I felt really scared and couldn't believe what I was hearing. My husband, who I always looked after when he was sick, was now someone I was afraid of. The doctor even said I might need to keep away from him for my own safety. This made me feel really anxious and frightened. Hi, I'm Betty Frieden, and I've spent the last decade working at a big pharmaceutical company. It's like a second home to me, a place where I feel comfortable and like I belong. Even though I'm 50, I still work full-time, and my coworkers really respect me for it. Not many people my age are still working, but I've always enjoyed it. I think part of the reason I'm so dedicated to my job is because I didn't get married until 4 years ago. My boss, Gerald, and I are close, maybe because we're both single. Once he jokingly asked if I was ever going to tie the knot, but I knew he was just teasing. Around that time, I was seeing Richard secretly, who later became my husband. Richard's a bit older, was married before, and like me, he didn't want kids. We met through a matchmaking service for people looking for companionship in their later years. We decided to keep our relationship a secret, not telling anyone about our plans, even though our boss joked about marriage. Eventually, Richard and I quietly got married without any big ceremony, just signing papers at City Hall. I was surprised by how simple it all was, but I was really looking forward to our life together. But then, with Dr. Lawrence's worrying advice, I had to rethink everything. My caring feelings for my sick husband were now mixed up with fear and doubt. Dr. Lawrence's words kept playing in my head, telling me I needed to do something to stay safe. Standing there, trying to understand what was happening, I realized I had to make a decision, and quickly. Suddenly, the life I knew and the future I imagined felt uncertain. I'm LA, and my husband Richard works at a factory. Honestly, I make more money than he does. Richard got his job right after high school. As for me, I grew up in an orphanage and always wanted to be independent. That's why I didn't want to quit my job at the pharmaceutical company after we got married. I loved my job too much. When Richard and I got married, I told my manager Gerald right away. He congratulated me, but I could tell he had mixed feelings. Maybe he felt a bit lonely because his single buddy got married first. I tried joking with him about it, but he didn't seem to want to talk about it, so I dropped it. Despite Gerald's reaction, I was really happy about starting this new chapter with Richard. I imagined all the great things our future would bring. But reality wasn't as bright as I'd hoped. Life as newlyweds was pretty ordinary. Not much changed for me. I kept working, and the biggest change was moving to a more rural area and driving instead of taking the bus. Richard and I shared my old car because he didn't have one. About a year into our marriage, things started to get tough. Richard started showing signs of being depressed. He seemed different, barely eating breakfast, lost in thought, and even mixing up simple things like condiments. His clothes didn't match, and he became quieter both at work and at home. While I always admired Richard's quiet strength, his silence became too much, making it feel like I was living alone. This loneliness crept up on me as I noticed these small but important changes in him. I realized that Richard might be struggling with a mental health issue. Watching someone you care about struggle without knowing how to help is really tough. So I took Richard to a clinic that focuses on both mind and body health, where he was diagnosed with depression. I had a basic understanding of depression, but hearing the diagnosis made everything feel a bit darker. The doctor explained that the best way to deal with depression is to address its main cause directly. Finding the exact cause of Richard's depression was tough. He had been working at the same factory for years without any problems, and nothing major had changed in his job. If anything, I worried that maybe our marriage had something to do with it. But when we talked to the doctor, I told him we were happy together and couldn't see any obvious problems at home that might have caused Richard's depression. The doctor told us to come back if we noticed any changes or had any ideas about what might be causing it. But even after several visits to the clinic, we couldn't figure out why Richard was feeling so down. As time went on, his depression just got worse. On his worst days, he could hardly get out of bed. Sometimes he'd have headaches, or he'd call in sick to work. His appetite disappeared, and he noticeably lost weight. Eventually, he couldn't keep working and had to quit his job. Richard felt really guilty about relying on me financially, but I told him I was okay with it. My main concern was his health. It was hard to see him struggling so much, and I worried about him constantly, especially when I was at work. There was a scary moment when he got lost while out, which made me worry he might not just be dealing with depression, but maybe dementia too. This idea added to my stress. When coworkers asked how things were going, I had to admit that Richard wasn't getting better. Watching someone you love suffer so much without knowing how to help is really tough. One day, Gerald noticed I looked exhausted and gave me an energy drink. Drinking it made me feel a bit better, and I was touched by his support. He reminded me that we're all in this together, and his words nearly made me cry. With everything going on with Richard, I hadn't realized how much stress I'd been carrying. I realized I had to hold myself together, or I might fall apart too. so I focused on my work, trying to keep some normalcy in our lives. A year passed and things with Richard didn't get better. They actually got worse. As our third wedding anniversary neared, I couldn't see any hope for his condition. Then one morning, I noticed our car was missing. I checked again, but it was definitely gone. Since Richard's diagnosis, I was the only one who drove it, and I hadn't used it since the day before, so it should have been at home. Worried, I asked Richard if he knew anything about where the car might be. He casually mentioned he thought it was there when he got home yesterday. I remembered he had gone out for a bit while I was at work. The doctor had suggested he try walking or jogging to help him cope. If the car was there when he came back, it must have disappeared sometime during the night. With the car gone, I had no choice but to use public transport, which made me about 10 minutes late for work. I told Gerald about the missing car, and although he understood it, he was puzzled too. He wondered if Richard might have taken it, but I didn't think so, considering Richard's condition and how he avoided driving since he got sick. It just didn't add up. Despite Richard's memory lapses and mood swings, I couldn't imagine him being behind the missing car. The car mystery added another layer of complexity to our already difficult situation. As soon as I realized the car was gone, I reported it to the police, hoping it would be found soon. But deep down, I worried it might be gone for good. And if that wasn't enough, something else strange happened on the day I was supposed to get my paycheck. I went to the bank and found my personal account was empty. I was shocked. We did have a shared account, which I checked next, only to find it was empty too. I was completely puzzled. Richard and I shared a joint account, but he didn't have access to my personal account and he didn't know its PIN. Yet, somehow, all our savings were gone. I felt a cold shock wash over me, and when I got home, I confronted Richard. I asked him if he knew anything about the missing money from our joint account. He seemed genuinely confused and denied knowing anything about it. Because of his depression, I hesitated to push him further, worried it might make things worse for him. Richard looked distant, lost in one of his frequent dazes caused by his condition. I couldn't help but wonder if he could have taken the money without realizing it. Planning to discuss this with the police, I felt overwhelmed by the double blow of losing both our car and our savings. The financial strain was tough, especially since I didn't have family to fall back on. With the small community clinic unable to provide enough help for Richard, we decided to switch him to a larger hospital with more resources. They gave us a referral letter, so we took a taxi to our first appointment at the general hospital. The whole experience was new and a bit scary for me, and I felt uneasy throughout the journey. Richard stayed quiet, lost in his thoughts as we arrived at the hospital. Taking a deep breath, I walked in and handed over the referral letter at the reception, expecting a wait. The general hospital was bustling with patients, each waiting for their turn. After about an hour, Richard was called in for his consultation. While he went inside, I took out a book to pass the time. But hardly had Richard entered the doctor's office when a nurse approached me. "Excuse me, are you Mrs. Simmons?" she asked. I confirmed, and she said the doctor wanted to see me. Familiar with discussing Richard's condition, I assumed it was a routine matter and followed her, though with some anxiety. The nurse led me to a different room, where a doctor, about 10 years older than me with graying hair and a gentle manner, greeted me. Before I could even sit down, I asked if this was about Richard's condition. He nodded seriously, and I braced myself for potential bad news. The doctor's next words caught me completely off guard. He advised me to keep my distance from my husband, revealing that Richard had been arrested for fraud a decade ago. My mind was racing with confusion. Why was this coming up now, during a routine medical visit? The doctor explained his suspicions about Richard's depression, suggesting that he might be faking it. He recalled recognizing Richard from a surgery 10 years back, where he had treated a deep cut on Richard's leg. It was a shock. I had thought we were addressing Richard's mental health, only to uncover his hidden past and a potential deception about his current condition. This unexpected revelation left me stunned, trying to reconcile the caring husband I knew with the person the doctor described. When the doctor mentioned recognizing a large scar on Richard's right leg, everything clicked into place. I knew about the scar but never knew how he got it, as Richard had never mentioned it. Finding out that the doctor before me was the one who had treated Richard's injury years ago felt like an unbelievable twist of fate. The doctor's revelation continued, unveiling that Richard had injured himself during a confrontation with his former wife, stemming from his fraudulent actions against her. He had stolen her luxury possessions and money. Shockingly, he had even pretended to have dementia during that period, tricking his wife into lowering her guard before committing the fraud. This repeated behavior of feigning illness to aid his deception was horrifying. Learning about Richard's criminal history and his arrest was overwhelming. I hadn't investigated Richard's past before marrying him. Having been alone for most of my life, I was just grateful to find someone willing to be my partner. The doctor's grave warning that Richard could pose a threat to me sent shivers down my spine. There was a gravity in his tone that made it clear this was a serious issue. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been deceived. In the days that followed, I struggled to maintain a facade of normalcy around Richard while secretly plotting my next moves. I made the decision to install surveillance cameras throughout our home to monitor Richard's actions when I wasn't present. About a week later, I noticed that a watch and bag were missing. Upon reviewing the footage from the cameras, I saw Richard leaving the house with them and returning later with a stack of cash, looking oddly pleased with himself. His behavior didn't match that of someone suffering from depression. This footage confirmed my worst suspicions. Richard was responsible for stealing my belongings, the car, and our savings. Confronted with undeniable evidence of his deceit, I felt crushed. Richard had lied to me and manipulated me, betraying the trust I had placed in him. It became clear that I needed to take significant action against someone who had pretended to be vulnerable and in need of care, only to exploit my compassion and generosity. The realization that Richard had betrayed my trust was agonizing. I had devoted myself to working and caring for what I believed was an ailing partner. Divorce seemed like too feeble a response to the profound deceit I had endured. It was evident that we needed to go our separate ways. But I desired more than just a mere separation. I wanted Richard to fully grasp the seriousness of his actions and to rectify the harm he had caused. With a heavy heart and tears threatening to spill, I gathered the divorce papers and meticulously completed them with all the necessary details. The next day, feigning normalcy, I informed Richard that I needed to step out briefly. I had already arranged to take a day off from work, explaining the urgency of my situation to my understanding employer, who had granted me the sudden leave. At the police station, I presented my case, displaying the footage I had captured of Richard's deception to the officers. Initially, they seemed hesitant to take action based solely on the video evidence. However, after confirming with the pawn shop where Richard had sold the stolen items and tracking down my car being sold as a used vehicle, the evidence against him began to accumulate. It was also discovered that he had illegally accessed my bank accounts, raising suspicions about his purported depression. As the truth came to light, I was flooded with a complex mix of relief and sorrow. The police decided to move swiftly given Richard's criminal history, and they prepared to arrest him. Upon returning home with the officers in the early afternoon, I found Richard there, visibly taken aback by my unexpected return and the presence of the police. Despite the divorce papers clutched in my hand, his focus remained on the officers as one of them announced his arrest for fraud. Richard attempted to protest, citing his depression as a defense, but I knew better. The doctor from the general hospital had already cast doubt on the legitimacy of his claims regarding his mental health condition. In that pivotal moment, as the weight of both the legal repercussions and the dissolution of our marriage settled on him, Richard's facade began to crumble. Choosing this course of action was agonizing but essential to safeguard myself and pursue justice for the betrayal and manipulation I had endured. At the police station, my sudden eruption of emotion caught even the officers off guard, but it seemed to finally pierce through Richard's veneer of composure. As the police placed him in handcuffs, Richard's facade of defiance cracked. He appeared defeated, his bravado replaced by frustration as he was escorted away. Observing the scene unfold, I felt strangely detached, as though I were watching the unraveling of someone else's life. Since the doctor's sobering warning, reality had felt distorted. Yet here I stood, confronting the stark truth of my circumstances, determined to forge ahead from the chaos Richard had wrought. Witnessing Richard being escorted away by the police felt surreal, akin to a scene from a dream. This moment marked a significant turning point, offering a glimpse of a return to the life I had known before the tumult of marriage consumed it. While a sense of relief washed over me, knowing I would no longer be ensnared in Richard's manipulative grasp, it was followed by a wave of loneliness. After waiting over 47 years to marry, The prospect of solitude once again loomed over my newfound liberation. 2 months later, our divorce was officially finalized. The process had been slightly delayed due to Richard's arrest, but as everything became official, my emotions had settled, allowing me to reflect on our shared history with clarity. Richard's future was uncertain, facing imprisonment for his second offense. I could only hope that this experience would prompt him to genuinely reconsider his choices. In the aftermath of our marriage, which had disintegrated into nothing more than a disillusioning memory, I found myself contemplating my next steps during a simple lunch at work. It was then that my boss, Gerald, approached, casually making a remark as he joined me with his store-bought hot dog lunch. "I think you'd be just fine if you were with me," he said, almost casually. His words caught me off guard, and it took a moment for their full weight to sink in, leaving me momentarily flustered. "Yes, I'm serious," he added, noticing my hesitation, his tone smooth yet sincere. I was left speechless, my lunch momentarily forgotten, as I processed his proposition. Gerald then returned to work, leaving me to mull over his unexpected offer. In the days that followed, the thought of a romantic relationship with Gerald hadn't crossed my mind, yet I couldn't ignore the care and stability he had consistently shown me. His dependable presence and responsible demeanor suddenly seemed to shine in a new light. Despite my initial surprise as I continued eating, the possibilities Gerald had introduced began to take root, hinting at a future I hadn't dared to consider until now. The idea of inviting Gerald out for a meal after work ignited a warmth within me, sparking a glimmer of hope for what lay ahead. Perhaps this was the perfect moment to embark on a fresh journey, exploring the potential for happiness and companionship once again. Stepping out of my comfort zone and into a new beginning with someone who had always been kind and supportive felt both exhilarating and reassuring. Tonight, I resolved, could mark the beginning of something wonderful and new. Today is a big day for me because I'm at home, surrounded by walls full of memories. Jack is here too, looking so proud and happy. He's exploring the rooms with excitement, and I can't help but feel his energy rubbing off on me. We're in the main part of my family's house, the place where my dad's dreams came true. My dad worked really hard to make this place amazing, and now it's worth a whopping $100 million. It's like his legacy, something he left behind for me when he passed away. Now, without my dad by my side, my husband wants a piece of our family's legacy. He insists that what used to be mine alone should now belong to both of us. But I know better. I have proof. Papers with my name, Sarah, as the rightful owner. At 42, I work in the digital world, thanks to my job at an online bank. This career wasn't just a whim, it was shaped by the values my parents taught me about money management. They showed me how important it is to be responsible with finances, lessons I still carry with me today. Growing up with money, my parents taught me to respect it and not take it for granted. Despite our wealth, they made sure I didn't grow up spoiled. My allowance was just like everyone else's, and we didn't eat fancy meals all the time. I went to a regular public school, not some fancy private one. But somehow, rumors about us being super rich spread anyway. People thought my life was all about luxury and fun because of our big house and money. "Sarah, with your huge house and all your money, life must be easy, right? You must have all the cool gadgets and games. Can we come over and play?" People often asked me these questions, thinking I had everything. But the truth was, my life wasn't as extravagant as they thought. I didn't have the newest toys or gaming consoles, but people still assumed I did. Sometimes it felt like everyone just wanted to be my friend because of my family's money. "Sarah, you're rich, right? Can you lend me some money?" People asking for money always made me uneasy. It felt like they didn't understand the values my parents taught me. Then, I got into a tough spot when I accidentally broke Maria's gaming console. I didn't have any money at that moment, which made things even worse. Around the same time, Julie and I became classmates. She asked if I had told my parents about the accident, but I was too scared of disappointing them to say anything. "I can't tell them. They might get mad." "That's why I'm asking you, Sarah," she confessed. Saying no felt awful, especially since I didn't want things to be awkward at school. But my parents were clear about not lending money, so I had to apologize to Julie and explain that I couldn't help. After I couldn't help Julie, she ended up crying. And soon rumors started flying around. People accused me of not helping a friend in need, even though my family was well off. I tried to explain that I didn't have any money to spare, but it didn't seem to matter. Then, Maria said something that really hurt. She suggested that I cared more about money than friendship. Things got worse when Maria and Julie started spreading lies, saying I owed them money and refused to pay for the broken console. The school found out the truth eventually and scolded Maria and Julie. But instead of stopping, the rumors got worse and even reached my parents. My dad decided to deal with it and organized a meeting with their families. Even though they said sorry, I decided to stay away from Maria and Julie after that. I still had to deal with their looks and whispers, but at least there were no more direct confrontations. During dinner that night, my dad shared advice that stuck with me for years. He said it's important to stand by your decisions, especially when it comes to money. Sarah, it's okay to say no, he said with a smile. You don't have to tell anyone about your finances. If someone keeps asking, just say you'll have to check with your parents, even if you know you can't lend money. This lesson about handling money matters gracefully and firmly became really important to me. As I grew up, I became more careful about who I let into my life, focusing on friendships based on character, not money. After university, I made sure to keep my work and personal life separate, avoiding any financial complications. This whole experience taught me the importance of setting boundaries in both friendships and finances, and it's shaped who I am today. When I was 35, I met Jack through a friend, and despite him being a bit younger, his genuine personality quickly won me over. We started casually dating, and before long, it turned into something serious. 2 years later, we had a beautiful wedding, which made my parents really happy. After we'd been married for about a month, my dad suggested that Jack come over to our house. I trusted Jack, but I was worried that he might accidentally reveal some private family stuff because he loves to talk. Still, after a month of marriage, I felt ready to let him in on everything about my family. So I invited him to visit my parents' house. Jack was amazed when he saw my family's house. His surprise was obvious, showing that he hadn't realized how well off my family was. Even though the visit went well, Jack couldn't stop asking about our money on the way home. I didn't know much about our finances myself, so his questions made me feel uneasy. A few months after we got married, my mom called to tell me that my dad was in the hospital. It was a shock, especially since I didn't know he was having health problems. Thinking back to our last visit, I remembered how he didn't seem well, and now I felt really worried and guilty. When I went to the hospital with my mom that Saturday, my dad tried to stay cheerful, but we could tell he was feeling down. He apologized for what he saw as a burden to us, showing his gentle nature. Then the doctors told us he had advanced pancreatic cancer, and it had spread too much for surgery. It was like a punch to the gut. We couldn't believe someone as health-conscious as my dad could get so sick. After the diagnosis, my dad stayed strong. He just wanted us to be happy, which made us all tear up. I wanted to spend every moment with him, but hospital rules meant only close family could visit. He wished for our friends to be around to make happy memories at home, which reminded us of the life he wanted for us. So I promised to keep our home full of joy, even after he was gone. Keeping that promise became really important to me. I decided to renovate our family home, something to focus on during such a tough time. Jack, always caring, worried about how much I was doing for my dad, not realizing the other stuff I was dealing with, like our family's estate issues that I hadn't told him about. When Jack asked about my dad's health, I finally opened up to him about everything we were going through. It was a relief to have the support while juggling work, hospital visits, and all the emotions. However, things got tense when Jack started asking about my dad's money and the family estate. He even suggested getting legal advice, just in case something happened to my mom too. It brought up painful memories for me. My dad had a lawyer he trusted, but Jack's insistence on being cautious with money started causing problems between us. A few months later, my dad passed away after bravely battling his illness. Then, the discussions about inheritance started within the family. I ended up getting a big house worth $5.5 million. But Jack's growing interest in the inheritance, despite me trying to keep him out of it, made things even harder. He was excited about moving into the mansion and kept asking about financial stuff, which caught me off guard. I later found out he'd been talking to my cousin at the funeral, who mentioned how the house would be a waste if it stayed empty. That just made things more complicated. Despite my attempts to explain to Jack that the inheritance wasn't something we shared, he didn't seem to listen. Our relationship started getting more hostile because of it. Even though he was there at my dad's funeral, Jack didn't help out with the memorial services or the legal stuff that followed. As things started to settle down and life went on, Jack dropped a bombshell. He said he changed the ownership of my family home to his name, and he had legal papers to prove it. I was shocked and hurt. Not only did he break my trust, but it also showed a huge lack of respect for our relationship and the boundaries we had. Dealing with inheritance issues brought up bigger problems in our marriage. We had to rethink what we valued, how much we trusted each other, and where our relationship was headed. When Jack told me he changed the ownership of our family home without telling me, I was shocked and hurt. He said he was tired of our marriage and suggested we live together as roommates in the house, with him not giving me much financial support. He even threatened divorce if I didn't agree, which was a lot to take in on top of everything else. I begged him to think about what he was doing and why he made such a big decision without talking to me. He said he'd talked to a lawyer about changing the ownership without my permission. Things got so bad that divorce seemed like the only way out. I was heartbroken and lost, feeling like I had to distance myself from the home and life I'd shared with Jack. I couldn't understand why he'd do something like this, and it felt like money had changed and for the worse. The next day, Jack demanded the house keys, saying the house was his now. This just made things worse. He tried to get into the house, but security stopped him. I showed them the real ownership papers, proving the house was mine because of my dad. Seeing the proof, Jack was shocked. He trusted a guy named Jerry to help him with legal stuff, and Jerry had lied to him. Jack had even given Jerry $360,000 to change the ownership, but it turned out to be a scam. Jack was really upset. He kept trying to call Jerry, but Jerry wouldn't answer. Jack was mad at him for tricking him and taking his money. Then he turned his anger on me, saying I spent too much money on things he thought were unnecessary. He even questioned if I understood how inheritance stuff worked. Even though Jack tried to fix things and suggested we give our marriage another chance, the trust between us was too broken. I asked the security guard to help him leave, closing a painful chapter of my life. In the months that followed, I had time to think about everything that happened. It made me realize how important trust and honesty are in a relationship. What happened with Jack, all the lies and betrayal, taught me to be careful not to let money cloud my judgment. During my dad's first memorial service at our family temple, Jack showed up unexpectedly. Since our divorce, things hadn't been going well for him. He didn't have a job, he had money problems, and it seemed like the people he trusted had let him down. He looked really sad and lost, standing there in contrast to the solemn occasion. As he tearfully tried to apologize, his actions unintentionally disrupted the memorial, causing a commotion among my relatives. Despite his emotional distress, I had to ask him to leave, and security had to step in to make sure it happened. It was a difficult moment, especially during such a solemn occasion, leaving me with mixed emotions, but also a strong desire to move forward and leave our past behind. I decided it was time to leave my parents' home, something I'd been planning for a while. I found a new place to live, cutting ties with Jack for good. Meanwhile, Jack kept coming to the family property, which we had turned into a rental villa. My mom and I ran the villa together, turning it into a happy place for many people to visit and enjoy. On his side, Jack seemed to be trying to make positive changes. He got a new job and was really focused on starting over. Turning our family home into a rental villa not only honored my dad's vision, but also created a welcoming place for guests from all walks of life. The villa, known for its stunning views and beautiful garden, became really popular. We hosted all sorts of events there, from small weddings to big family parties. Working on it with my mom brought us even closer and made us really happy. As the villa became more successful, we decided to add more stuff to make it even better. We put in a swimming pool, a cozy outdoor lounge, and a fun area for kids to play. We were really committed to making sure our guests had an amazing time, and it paid off. The villa became a top spot for people looking for a peaceful getaway and unforgettable experiences. This whole project wasn't just about making money. It was about making my dad's dream come true and creating special memories for our guests. Taking care of the villa's garden filled me with a deep sense of happiness. Seeing our family home turned into a place where people could come together, have fun, and make lasting memories made me really proud. I could almost imagine my father looking down with pride at what we had accomplished, bringing his dream to life. This venture not only fulfilled his vision, but also gave us financial stability and a sense of freedom. Along the way, I learned important lessons about trust, money, and the strength needed to forge my own path, separate from the challenges of the past. In this journey of self-discovery, I discovered that facing difficulties can actually make you stronger and more determined. I heard news about Jack from friends, and it seemed like he was turning his life around, finding a meaningful job and learning from his mistakes. Seeing his progress gave me a sense of peace, knowing that both of us were moving forward and growing. My father's dream became a driving force for growth, not just for me and my mom, but for everyone who visited the rental villa. It became a place of joy and celebration, a sanctuary where people could create lasting memories. The success of the villa is a testament to my father's vision, reminding us of the values of resilience and hard work. Through this venture, we've created more than just a place to stay. It's a source of happiness, a place for making memories, and proof that dreaming big and putting in the effort